Before he leaves the building, former President Kimishima had some interesting words to say about the 3DS and Nintendo's continued support for the system, and we are wondering if and when this will change. What's going on, everybody? It's Zach from Switchforce. Gabe is here, and changing of the guard over at Nintendo. But before he leaves, Kimishima had some real nuggets about the 3DS and sort of about Nintendo's frame of mind when it comes to balancing the two platforms. He said that given that Nintendo Switch is a home gaming system that can be taken on the go, this situation may change if it grows from being a one per household system to a one per person system. But the price of Nintendo Switch is not something with which most parents would buy a system for every one of their children in a short period of time. Moving forward, we will work to ascertain what kinds of play people want at which price points, and as long as there is such demand, we will continue to sell the Nintendo 3DS system. I see the product coexisting with Nintendo Switch at this point in time. Now, what's interesting here is not that Nintendo 3DS is carrying forward. We know that there's already been games announced for 2019. They've expressed interest in keeping it alive beyond that, but it's their explicit reasoning that they view the Switch as a one per household console. And I'm wondering, Gabe, if you ever think that the Switch will get to one per person and what it would take to get there.
I think you sell it without the dock and you cut the price. And I think at that point, you can easily have each kid have one. Yeah, we live in weird times, right? Every single year, people get these $1,000 phones that they probably shouldn't get every single year. For some time, I think it's kind of gone away now, but iPads was something that families were getting on a yearly basis. So, yeah, the 300 is probably a barrier for a lot of people. But if you sell it without a dock and, take a little bit of a loss, sell it at 200 or something, which Nintendo doesn't like doing. So I don't think it happens. But if you manage to do that somehow, even if it's yours down the line when you're no longer taking a loss, maybe at that point it becomes a one per person console instead. And, this is a great reason why I support this. I think 3DS should be around because of this. This makes total sense to me.
Yeah, I mean, the price barrier is definitely what seems to be the obstacle between the Switch proliferating as much as I'm sure Nintendo hopes. I do feel like we get there, and I think price obviously factors in majorly, but I also think it's a time thing. I don't, sharing is caring, but once there are so many games and so much time between purchases, does the Switch start to grow? If they see it becoming this 40, 60, 80 million seller eventually, 100 million seller, maybe even, it's going to have to go beyond one console. So I do wonder if, in spite of price, if that's sort of an inevitability. I mean, we see the PS4 obviously has dropped in price, but that still is a very expensive piece of hardware that has reached numbers far beyond where the Switch is. And maybe PS4, I don't know the exact stats, but maybe that still is a one per household thing for the most part. I guess I'm also a little surprised, and obviously they're not going to reveal their hand, but there doesn't seem to be any indication that they're looking to mix it up anytime soon. It sort of seems like they're pretty content with the 3DS, and I wonder if on that front we will need to wait for a better Switch before we get a better 3DS.
That's an interesting point, right? Because I am of the thinking that we don't need another 3DS at all. Why not have the Switch be the unified platform going forward? That's a question we've always had. And, this is a good answer. But, 5 years from now, why have another dedicated handheld when, hypothetically, you can bring down the price of the Switch quite a bit?
Right.
And even when you introduce whatever's next after the Switch, the next console, have the Switch be the equivalent of the 3DS. I don't know that the 3DS line needs to stay, even though, great name value, and there's so many of them out there. And if the next one comes in at a more competitive price, I can see a lot of aspects of how this could shake out. I'm just very curious to see what Nintendo's going to do.
Yeah, we've talked sort of behind the scenes about, what would a new 3DS look like, or what would a new handheld look like? And, the main thing you go to is, okay, well, they would push the graphics. I think it's just dicey ground of, at what point do you push the graphics too close to Switch that it gets to this weird zone of, one of them is going to feel like the oddball. And if the 3DS, like you mentioned, has such an install base, and the goal is just to push software, and at the same time the goal is to expand the Switch, yeah, maybe maybe inserting something else into that equation isn't in their best interest. I think, simply put, when the Switch goes from 300 at some point down to 200, I don't know how many years it takes to get there. Now I feel like that is a handheld price point, and I feel like that's something that I feel like, Kimishima would feel like, hey, that's something that can be purchased by everyone. But
Kimishima won't be around for that, though.
That's true. So he will think that from afar, and the new president will be the one making the claims. I just think it's interesting how they do very much view the Switch as a dedicated home console, and that's something that we've seen reiterated over and over, and it almost feels like a catch-22. Like, they don't embrace the fact that it's a handheld because they want the 3DS to succeed, and then they say the reason for the 3DS is because it is a home console. Like, it's kind of like a two sides of the same coin type deal. And I do wonder if they more aggressively pitch the Switch and push it as a handheld, what that would do to the 3DS, if anything. I mean, they're saying, and this was earlier in the interview, he said that consumers purchased Nintendo 3DS systems in numbers we expected last fiscal year. It has an ample software lineup at a price point that makes the system affordable, especially for parents looking to buy for their kids. We expect that demand to continue during this fiscal year as well, so we will continue to sell the product, which is like a no-brainer, obviously. But even given the extreme already established base, like, it's still pushing units. And I'm not a parent. I don't have a family of 4. But I would think that at some point that has to shift. The weird part to me is, like, Kimishima doesn't seem to think it's happening anytime soon. That, like, the difference in price is really such a huge factor in terms of how these systems are viewed.
Yeah.
I mean, how much do you spend for a phone?
A lot.
Right. Like, I guess or an iPad. Like,
a lot.
Maybe it's just pre-established notions and, like, what we're used to in the gaming industry. But at some point, say Switch goes to $279, can that be an okay handheld price? Can that be a one per person system? I don't know that $20 is I don't know, maybe $250. Is $50 enough? Is $250?
Yeah, I mean, but you also got to remember the games are more expensive. Oh, they are and they aren't, I guess, because there's a lot of indies that aren't more expensive. But Walmart, box retail games are more expensive on Switch. So,
right.
Yeah.
And what is, like, I'm not saying there's any, like, nefarious moves being made, but, like, at what level does Nintendo intentionally keep the price higher so that they can sell both? Because at the end of the day, selling Switch at, an unstoppable rate at 300 and selling 3DS at a still continuous rate is more money for them. Like, is this at some level, this has to be, like, an enjoyable problem. You know what I mean? Like, there's...
Oh yeah, they're good.
Yeah.
I don't think they're losing any sleep over this at all. No.
Yeah. So, like, I guess if we're gonna just look to the future, I don't expect a Switch price cut at all this year.
No.
I think maybe we see something fall 2019. But again, if you're gonna rock Smash and Pokemon whenever Pokemon comes out, Q4 this year, Q1 next year, and then you're still gonna, like, load up again with Animal Crossing, Metroid Prime, like. This isn't like a doldrum situation where you're going to need to drop it. If anything, the support is going to just greatly increase, and we're going to see strong third party, and the sales are going to buoy the releases. And I don't think a price drop is needed. So I do wonder if this situation, like, we kind of thought, oh, maybe 3DS will drop off in 2018. Maybe it'll drop off in 2019. I'm of the mindset that this situation is not in flux for quite a while. Like, this is going to be what we got going on for the foreseeable future, maybe even 2020 beyond.
Yeah, well, then it becomes a weird question. Like, hey, do we ever get another Pokemon game on 3DS? Like, have they completely moved on from that? Like, is this Pokemon Switch game
where
just
do the
an
resources
anomaly?
go?
Yeah, like, I don't... Yeah,
and
who knows at that point?
How do you balance that? I mean, they're dipping into remasters now with the Mario and Luigi games on 3DS and Luigi's Mansion, so... Maybe it takes more of that route. Obviously, they have slowed the releases to an extent, but they're still keeping some tentpole characters. Wario, Luigi, Yokai Watch,
Wario Temple.
I mean, he's as wide as 3 tentpoles, Gabe. So don't give me that. No, I have to say that I'm sort of surprised. I didn't expect a new console anytime soon, but I did expect the phasing out and either a unified front or the slow introduction of something innovative. But yeah, I now am of the belief that until we get a Switch iteration, we will not get a 3DS successor, because I think that puts us in weird, dicey ground in terms of like, obviously you have to raise the price for this new thing, but you're all at the same time trying to lower the price of the Switch thing, but now their graphics are going to be comparable. And to me, the last point like that it brings up is, do we ever get a dockless Switch, or does that cannibalize this entire operation?
Well, you want it to cannibalize the entire operation, so
I mean,
3DS
we do
can
as
go
consumers.
away.
Yeah, we do. But
or give us a Switch Pro.
Yeah.
Do that and keep this Switch as is. Make it cheaper. I don't know. Nintendo, do something.
Yeah. Let us know your take on this interesting situation in the comments. I think it's fascinating. I think like this is one of those times I want to be like a freaking college researcher and like dig deep into. Like, I want to go interview Kimishima and like investigate all the financials of Nintendo, and I want to pick their brains. So, you guys have any thoughts on when the 3DS will ever go away, if it ever goes away, the current state of things, and if you foresee the Switch transitioning to this one per person system? Final point here, I think it does. I think inevitably, regardless of price, there is enough software, enough. I mean, and the longer we delay the PS5, Xbox 2 generation, I think the more likely it is that Switch does become one per person, because there isn't that push or pull to buy another new thing elsewhere. So like, hey, my brother has a Switch, I want one too. Hey, my son has a Switch, I want one too. And we'll see. Let us know your take in the comments down below. Thanks so much for watching. Make sure to subscribe, stay up to date on all the latest and greatest from Kimishima, Nintendo, and the Switch. Follow us on Twitter and Discord. Links in the description below. Go play your 3DS. Until next time, for myself and Gabe, Switch Force out.